Hi, I'm Liz. Welcome to my channel. I am a carnivore, and what that means is that I only eat animals or animal products. Things like occasionally I'll have cheese, I'll have eggs, but mostly I eat beef. I do eat pork and chicken on occasion, and I will eat a decent amount of bacon, but primarily my meat of choice is beef. Now, why would someone do this diet? It sounds nuts. Why would you have like 5 things that you can eat and limit yourself to that? Well, I can tell you my story of how I ended up on carnivore. And a lot of people, I think, have the same story. But I can tell you that before I found carnivore, I wasn't really living, at least not that well. So why don't we talk about it today on the Carnivore Science channel? So a few days after Thanksgiving of 2022, I woke up with the most horrible hip pain. Specifically, it was like the ilium bone on the right side. I believe it's called the ilium bone. Not a radiology tech, so I don't have all the anatomy memorized like my daughter-in-law does. But it hurt so bad, and it felt like that's where it was coming from. It was the craziest thing. I've never had hip pain of any kind, so this was really weird. And on top of it, I felt like the pain was radiating in a way that I thought maybe something was wrong with me internally. It was very, very, very severe. I called my sister. I actually asked her to drive me because I was really worried that it was something else because you couldn't really determine exactly where the pain was coming from. So I did the unthinkable, and during a holiday weekend, I went to the ER. Now, you can imagine what an emergency room looks like around that time. I don't know if you know this. I worked in hospitals for a really long time, and you know, people would think like around the holidays that a hospital would be empty. Not so much. A lot of weird stuff happens during the holidays. I mean, not just accidents and drinking and driving and things like that. I mean, you get a lot of that too, but there's a lot of flare-ups and attacks and just generally unhealthiness that goes on that is just so much worse during a holiday season. So I actually went to the ER. It was that bad. In fact, I was on a medication at the time for a different condition, and the medication is called Tramadol, which is a pretty significant painkiller. And for this hip pain to actually keep bothering me, even though I had something to take for it, was pretty scary because, you know, that's a pretty decent painkiller, and it wasn't touching this hip pain. On top of that, if you have a high deductible insurance plan, you know that this visit's going to mean $3,000 at least out of pocket. So I was pretty desperate. So I arrive at the ER in the evening and notice that there's about 1.5 million people there. They've been camped out for a while. It looked like half of them were passed out on couches. The entire room was full. This is the medical industrial complex we're talking about here. So it didn't seem that anybody was going back at all. I mean, you'd hear someone's name be called occasionally, but usually they just go up to the triage nurse, answer a question, and then be sent back to their seat. But that's what hospitals look like now. So there we sat in the waiting room for hours and hours and hours in the most uncomfortable chairs that had ever been invented. It really felt like they were invented for torture purposes. Your hip hurts already, and then you're moving around, you're shifting around, trying to get comfortable in this chair that just, I don't know, feels like a rock. It was terrible. But I'm sure you guys have been to the ER and it's a similar experience, most likely. As I sat there, I started to scan the room of all of the crowds of people that were waiting to be seen. And I had this overwhelming sense of dread that just loomed over me like some kind of urine-soaked cold blanket. It was horrible. This feeling, I can't even describe. That sounds disgusting, but that's the only way I can really describe it. It was just gross. I was so just filled with despair looking around the room and seeing there were all ages of people. There were younger people. There were a lot of older people. And a lot of people around my age that just looked in horrible, horrible shape. I didn't look that great at the time, but I mean, these people looked a lot worse than me even, and I felt terrible, so I could only imagine. I was about 55 and a half years old that day. I was sitting in the ER looking around at everybody in misery. There was an inner monologue that started in my head. This has happened before. It starts quiet at first, but then gets louder and louder until the message was loud and clear. You know, you're in your mid-50s, you're getting older, things are going to happen. You're just going to start to, have more problems, and you're going to start to, fall apart. You just got to realize that this is your future. This is where you're going to be, spending a lot of your time. Everything's not going to work like it used to when you were younger. Just brace yourself, because this is your future. I'm not sure why this particular pain at this particular time in my life caused that annoying little voice to come back in the back of my head. I've heard this voice before, like I've said, but it came back loud and clear. Just brace yourself and get used to it, because this is what your life's going to be like. All of these other people know it. You should know it too, and you should just accept it. This would seem like a shock or something, but really it was not. I had been sick for quite a long time, but I'll get back to that in just a bit. I knew, as this shroud of depression just kind of blanketed me, that there was no hope. There was no cures. There was not going to be anything fixed. We were probably going to be more medicated than we were before, but nothing was going to be cured and nothing was going to fix me. I knew that deep in my soul. I knew it. No matter what it was that was wrong with me, I would take a medication that would hijack some kind of system and mute the pain or the discomfort or quell the symptoms, but nothing was going to be fixed in any way, shape, or form. I knew this with ultimate certainty in that moment. Anyway, after hours of waiting, I finally was seen, and an MRI and a CT scan later, and many hours later, because we got to make you wait again, an equal amount of time that you waited in the waiting room, you've got to wait in the uncomfortable emergency room bed for the doctor to show up. They did give me a Percocet when I got back there, and that did help with the pain. Well, it should. I mean, it's Percocet, for God's sakes. Kind of kicked my butt too, but I was glad that the pain was subsiding, even though I knew it was just going to wear off and it was just going to come back with a vengeance, because I also knew that too. This was not going away. So eventually, Doogie Howser returned. If you're Gen X, you're going to know what that is. Otherwise, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Doogie Howser was this show about a 12-year-old that graduated medical school and started practicing medicine. It was kind of stupid. But he basically looked like, he didn't look like he was 12, but he looked like he could be 17 or something like that. And he had the stupidest expression on his face. He just looked at me and said, well, they didn't find anything. It's probably just inflammation. Oh, you don't say. And How do you know that? And what are you going to do about it? Well, we'll just give you a steroid. Okay, here's your $5,000. Thank you very much for nothing. He also talked to me in a way that would suggest that he thought I was either making a mountain out of a molehill or I had made it up. That kind of ticked me off because the pain was real and it was very severe. I am not one of these people who crumple up into a little ball because I can't handle any kind of pain. This was unusual. So steroids it was. Now, I was a little worried about taking any kind of additional medication because I had just recently developed a very crippling case of indigestion. Yep, for the past, I guess it was 3 or 4 months, I had been suffering from that. It started when I went to multiple dental appointments. They kept having trouble fitting a crown, and they had to do all of this drilling and all of this work in the same spot over and over and over again. And it took about 4 visits of intense work, and my jaw felt like it was just going to fall off because it was too much trauma. And I had been taking a steroid and then a bunch of ibuprofen for a period of time. Now, I've taken ibuprofen my entire life on and off. It's very bad for your digestive system. It basically just tears your stomach up like nobody's business. And I had taken so much of it, I didn't OD or anything, but I was just taking it very regularly, and I've never done that before. It was awful. It was the heartburn. I had never really experienced heartburn like this, but it felt like someone was stabbing me right here. I mean, stabbing me. It was awful. It scared the crap out of me, and I thought I was having a heart attack. I had gone to the doctor, and they put me on pantoprazole. Pantoprazole is a proton pump inhibitor. It lowers the amount of acid your stomach produces. Sounds like a really good idea, huh? You need to have an acidic environment in there to be able to digest your food. Anyway, another hijack mechanism. But I had been on that, so I was really worried about taking any additional type of medication because it might actually start, the indigestion coming back. I was still on the pantoprazole at that time. I didn't really like making all of these medicine soups in myself, and I had already been on other medications to begin with, so I wasn't really thrilled about, hey, here's another medicine. So I escaped from the ER and went home. But I think I should go back in time a little bit because I talk about how I had all these problems and I was really a very sick person, but I didn't realize it. And that sounds nuts too. That sounds like, what are you, crazy? You should know if you're a very sick person. I think it was that I just didn't realize it because of the mindset I was in, and the career path I chose has a lot to do with it. But it's a very interesting case study when you actually look back and see what your life was like. So we're going back with the most recent, which is the indigestion. Pantoprazole, the proton pump inhibitor, is not supposed to be used for more than, I'd say the maximum is like 4 weeks. It has quite a lot of side effects. And I know people that have been taking it for like 8 years, which is crazy. Their doctors just let them keep taking it and keep taking it and keep taking it. So that is the most recent thing I was suffering from before the hip thing. For years, I had always had a fairly bad case of insomnia, to the point that I actually had to take Ambien. Now, Ambien is a drug that you can hear some really horrifying stories about. I don't know, have you ever heard the story of the guy who takes the Ambien and he goes out to his workshop and starts playing with his chainsaw, but he doesn't remember doing anything? Yeah, that type of thing. I would have phone conversations with my mom, and I wouldn't remember them at all. And she's like, were you taking Ambien last night? So our rule was we had to actually, I'd say me, I was the only one taking it. I would have to take my pill and get my butt in the bed ASAP. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200 because you are going to do something stupid if you stay out of the bed. Now, if you get in the bed, you will fall asleep. It did help you sleep, but it made you kind of a psychopath otherwise. You would do all kinds of crazy things. And I mean, not crazy like, I don't know. I think there have been people who drove around like lunatics and stuff like that, but have conversations, 45-minute long conversations with your mom that you don't remember. That's kind of crazy to me. Ambien, or the actual name Zolpidem, is a non-benzodiazepine hypnotic, and it has a lot of side effects. As dependency problems, people start taking it. And again, you're not supposed to take it but for a short period of time. I know a guy at work right now who's been taking it for 10 years. 10 years, every night of his life. He has to take Ambien to be able to sleep. That is not okay. It's not okay to take a drug that long, and even it's contraindicated to take it for a very long period of time. But that doesn't stop the doctors from dishing it out day after day after day, forever and ever. I didn't take Ambien for as long as my friend at work did. I took it for probably a year or so, maybe. It could have been 6 months. I don't remember. I do remember thinking that I did not want to take that one forever because it did scare me. It really bothered me. The side effects, the memory loss, and the weird behavior. Even though it worked to help me sleep, it just creeped me out. So I did not take that one that long. But I did suffer from insomnia for years. I would wake up in the middle of the night multiple times. I would not be able to go back to sleep. A lot of it probably had to do with anxiety. So I suffered from that for years. And then we go backwards in time a little bit. And I was attacked. And it really freaked me out. And I had a pretty severe case of PTSD. In comes the benzos, the benzodiazepine, the Paxils, the SSRIs. Now, first of all, the benzodiazepines, like the Xanax, you end up taking those and it calms you. And it does work to calm you. It does work for anxiety. But those are awful too, and they're habit forming. The SSRIs are what I like to call zombie drugs. They give these to patients and it works, it seems to work for some people, but if you actually really look at what it's doing, it just turns them into a zombie so they don't really care enough to be depressed anymore. It's not that they were depressed and now they're not and it fixes the problem. Oh no, it doesn't do that. It just turns you into a literal zombie half of the time. It doesn't hit the root cause. It's just another drug that came out that actually made so much money. And they just recently, I did a video about this, but they just recently actually admitted that, well, the whole serotonin theory was flawed and they don't really have any proof for it. So they really don't have any evidence that that was the reason that people were depressed in the first place. Oh, they're like, my bad. Sorry. Funny how playing with brain chemicals turns out to be a really bad idea. Around the time I was being prescribed the benzos and the Ambien and the SSRIs for the PTSD, it was a little after that. It was probably around 2007 or so. My brother died suddenly. He was 5 years older than me, and he died of a very, very pathogenic strain of strep, group A strep. And it infected him. He kind of looked like he had a really bad cold. Went to the doctor. They threw some antibiotics at him and sent him on his way. And within 24 hours, he was dead. It was extremely, he was young. I mean, he was 45 years old. So it was horrifying because it came out of nowhere. Imagine, someone you love just gets the sniffles and then in no time they're actually dead. It was something, it's hard to wrap your head around. We were very close. So anyway, I don't want to think about it too much because it's hard. Even to this day, it's been years, but he, when that happened, right afterwards, and keep in mind, I'm taking Ambien sometimes. I was on the benzo. I was not taking the SSRI at the time. but I was taking the benzodiazepine, and I was taking Tramadol, and I'll get to when I started taking that in a moment. So after the funeral and everything, I started to feel really weird, and I called. I don't know what it is about Sixth Sense and some of the stuff that people, people will have this feeling that something bad is going to happen, and then it happens. I had that type of event. I felt like I was living in Florida and my sister was living in South Carolina. And it was only like a week or two after the funeral. And I had 2 children, and they were little. They were like 2 and 3 years old, maybe something like that. And I called her because I said, something bad is about to happen, and I think you need to be here to help with kids. Now, my husband was there, but I felt like I needed her to be with me, because it's just me and my sister now. My brother's gone, so I kind of wanted her near me. I had called her, and she's like, well, she's really far away, because Florida, it was Tampa, and Florida is a long drive. So she's like, are you sure? I mean, are you not overreacting? Da, da, da. But she agreed to come, because, she's just great that way. So she came, and she finally got there. She drove up, and she got there, and I remember being relieved that she was there, and they were trying to get me to lay down. And I was like, no, I can't lay down. If I lay down, something bad will happen to me. I knew something bad was going to happen to me, but I didn't know what. But they finally talked me into laying down. They gave me soup or something like that, and I went and laid down. And it was like I was hearing things in the house. Like I heard people milling about. I heard my husband in the bathroom outside of the master bedroom. And all of it was like going down a tunnel. The voice, I could hear him talking, but he sounded so far away. And then I came to, and I was in an ambulance. I had what had been classified as a petit mal seizure. I had several more after that. It's horrifying, because I was in the ambulance, and they were asking me, my husband had my children with him, and they're asking me, what is your name? What is your name? I couldn't tell them what my name was. They wanted to know if I recognized my husband and my children. I did not. I did not who they were. I did not know who they were. Now, after about 5 minutes, I did. But I cannot describe how horrifying that feeling is. And one of the reasons, according to several physicians I talked to after this, one of the reasons that I had these seizures, and this was much later that this was discussed, because they ruled it out and they just said, nope, it wouldn't be that, was because of the mixture of drugs that I was on, that I was prescribed by the same people. There was no warnings of taking all these things, because I was on Tramadol at the time, and I was on the benzo, and I had Ambien on and off, like here and there. I didn't take it for long periods of time at any given stretch, but I was taking a lot of these drugs. After the petit mal seizures, which were scary enough, there was some time, like a couple of weeks, where, I started to feel a little more normal. And then one day I was dropping off the kids at their school. I dropped both of them off, and I knew something was wrong. Now, it's not like I'm dizzy or I have a headache, or it's not like that. It's just I knew something was horribly wrong and something bad was going to happen. So I went straight to the ER. Just drove straight to the ER from the school, walked up to the lady who was checking people in, fell flat on my face, and had a grand mal seizure. Woke up. Again, I don't remember hitting the floor, but I woke up. I was tied to a gurney, and the nurse had asked me to please stop trying to punch the orderly in the face. Because evidently, when they were trying to get me sedated or get me to the bed or get me seen, I was pretty violent. That was kind of funny that I was trying to punch people out while I was going through this horrible thing. But it was a full-on grand mal seizure. So, there's that. That was interesting. Now, I did not have, I was put on gabapentin for a while. It's an anticonvulsive, and I was taking that for a while, and then I didn't take it anymore, and I did not have any more episodes because I did not have epilepsy. It was pretty scary because that feeling that something's coming for you and you just don't know what, it's hard to put into words how horrifying that is. So, we go backwards in time to when my daughter was born. I had 2 children. I had a son and then I had a daughter, and they're about 2 years apart. After my daughter was born, she's 20 now, I had the most horrible all over body pain that came out of nowhere. Nerves hurt, muscles hurt, everything just ached. I was fatigued, and I worked. I've always worked, so it was really hard working and trying to deal with this. It was difficult. So I had to go be seen. And this is when the magical diagnosis of fibromyalgia came into play. It's we don't know really what's wrong with you, so we're going to use this blanket term because this is what we say to people when we don't know what is actually wrong with them, and we're not going to try to find out why. This is where you go to the doctor and they literally poke you over and over again and say, does that hurt? Does that hurt? Does that hurt? And of course it hurts because everything hurts. I believe that it is mass inflammation caused by a lot of crap food, to be honest. But I suffered from that for years. They put me on a drug called Tramadol at the time. I took Tramadol for 17 years. Almost every day, pretty much every day, I took some amount of Tramadol in order to get me through the day because I suffered from so much, like just body aches, just horrible body aches. All opioid agonists work the same way. They bind to the opioid receptors in the brain to limit pain signals. I had a lot of reasons why I was eating and why I wasn't taking care of myself, but none of them were good ones. They were just excuses. I felt horrible. I had no energy. I was embarrassed. I wore oversized clothes all the time because I was so embarrassed by the way I looked. I never wanted to leave the house. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't do enough with my kids. I didn't spend time with them like I should have, not in quality ways outside of the house, because I was a hermit. I was actually just, when I wasn't working, I was actually just hiding from the world. I wasn't depressed, but I was close to being depressed. I was just very sad. And the year was it was between 2015 and 2016. I think it was closer to 2016. I'm fatter than I've ever been. I'm miserable. I feel bad. I'm taking all these medications. And I'm laying in the bed one day. And I remember this vividly. This was Epiphany number 1. The little voice came back, and it's telling me, well, it doesn't matter that you can be fat. You can eat all this. What do you care? You're not like 20 anymore. So, I mean, what are you like? You're close to being 50. So, why do you can be fat. You can eat whatever you want. Go ahead, enjoy yourself. Eat whatever you want. You might as well. I mean, there's no point in trying anything now. I just listened to this jackass voice in my head telling me to give up. And I started to get angry. I actually answered the voice in my head and shouted, no. I got up off my butt and I started doing some research. Years ago, I had done the Atkins diet when I had gained a tiny bit of weight, like when I was in college, and I knew that it worked. I knew this. I had experienced it, and I knew that like lowering your carbs actually worked to some degree. I didn't end up lowering carbs, but I did go to whole food. Whole food actually cleared up. This is one thing that did get cleared up before I went to some degree, not completely, but it did help. When I went whole foods instead of processed foods and I eliminated sugar way back then, I actually cleared up some IBS issues that I had. IBS runs rampant in my family, and I haven't had a problem with it since I started eating whole foods. So that was one thing that when I kind of went, it wasn't even keto in the beginning. I didn't do keto. I actually did just like whole fruits and vegetables and protein and stuff like that, but I still wasn't getting enough fat at the time, but I was limiting the crap out of my calories. In the beginning, when I first heard the little voice and I decided to rebel, I actually got on the treadmill and I was running like 2 miles every day at a minimum. I was literally killing myself working out. And I was doing about, I don't know, 800 calories a day or something crazy like that. I did lose a chunk of the weight. Then I transitioned to keto, and it was way more effective. But I still had all of these medical conditions on and off. I did not get rid of the medical conditions. I did get rid of more of the weight. So from 100 pounds, whole foods first, took a chunk out of it, and then some keto. But not until November of 2022, when I was laying in the bed after the ER visit, the voice came back, told me to give up. I was old and it's time to crawl into a corner and die. And I said no again. I do the research and I started to look for, why are people so sick? Why is nothing cured? Why? No one asked that question. No doctor wanted to know why. It was just, here's your pill. There's nobody asking why. Why is there rampant inflammation coming up? Why are we, giving up at age 50? Why are people just in this type of shape at this young of an age? And this just did not seem right to me, and I was determined to find answers. What I found after researching was people like Sean Baker, Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Berry with the beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. And all of a sudden, I was just like, oh my God, why didn't I see this? How is it that I could know that there were toxins in vegetables? And I did know that. How could I know that there were all kinds of inflammatory foods, and all of the processed food was inflammatory? And how could I not realize that I was not getting nutrient-dense food? Because I had had all the education, all of the medical education. I had had all of this. I should have known better. I looked at the actual labels of food and thought to myself as a chemist, there's no way this is normal. There is no way this is not harmful. And then I would just go, oh, well, it must be because, the establishment says it is. So whatever. So anyway, I just could not believe. This hit me like a ton of bricks. I started the carnivore diet. Not days. It was days after this visit. And I was very angry about not understanding what was wrong with me and why all this was going on. But not as angry as I became when about 3 days later, the most amazing things started to happen to me with respect to my health. It was a few days to a week that I started sleeping like the dead. In the beginning, I did lion diet. I only did red meat, like steaks, and water and salt. I did that for a couple of weeks. When I started doing that, the insomnia that I used to have was gone. Completely gone. And I mean, not only did I not have insomnia, but my body would kind of power down at like about the time it was supposed to power down around like 10 o'clock. I would start to get drowsy. And if I was sitting in a chair, I'm going to pass out in the chair. I would have to make sure I got up and got in the bed because I didn't want to fall asleep in the chair. And I would go get in the bed. I would go to sleep. And I wake up at 5 a.m. every day without an alarm clock. Like clockwork. No pun intended. But every night, this is the way I sleep. That started within a couple of weeks. Within I don't know, days to a week or two. It was just like so many things started to happen for me. The indigestion that I had that was so crippling and painful, gone in days. That was gone in days. And I stopped taking the pantoprazole, and it's just gone. No more. As long as I eat animal products and I don't eat anything outside of that, and I don't eat crap and things like that, it's gone. It's completely healed. Then, to my astonishment, I had been taking that medication, Tramadol, the pain medication, for 17 years on and off. I stopped taking it, and that was also within weeks. Just gone. 17 years of pain. Gone. The hip pain, gone. No steroids. I didn't need any steroids. The pain was gone. Everything was correcting itself. Years and years and years of suffering, gone. The additional weight that I kept gaining back, and that's one thing about keto, is that, in my opinion, if you have a significant amount of weight to lose, keto can work in the beginning. The problem I hear from a lot of people about keto is that when they actually go on keto and they lose a significant amount of weight, for some reason they end up gaining it back in a lot of cases. As opposed to when they go on carnivore, it seems to be more permanent. But this is not everyone. Not everyone can do carnivore because you have to choose your health over food. You have to prioritize your health over eating as enjoyment, or enjoying eating, or feeling like you're restricted. If you view food as fuel more than you do a sport or entertainment, carnivore is easy to do. It just is. Occasionally I will feel like, oh, I'll have nostalgic feelings about birthday cake or something, or I'll see something, and most of it's tied to some kind of memory or something like that. But if I have 5 choices of things I can eat, I'm fairly satisfied. Occasionally I'll get a little bored, but there's always recipes that you can make that are, kind of inventive, and is, ways for you to eat animal and animal products without it being too boring. If you get bored with it, or you just want something different just for different sake. But I think that's the thing that I had to actually realize, is that I needed to face the fact that I was a food addict and I was addicted to all the processed food. They make it so that you become addicted to it. Once you realize that and you face it and you deal with it, and that's the only way you really can, is if you are addicted to processed food and crappy foods and sugars and things like that, at some point you have to say goodbye to all that if you want your health back. And it's just a choice. It's like your health or a cream horn. Now, one thing I didn't mention that I had understood this phenomenon before, because I was on keto, is that I was in a high level of ketosis most of the time, and the creativity and the focus and clarity of mind, there's no food that I would trade that feeling for. There is no food that I would ever want to eat that would destroy the fact that if you're in ketosis, and I have a high level of ketones in my blood at any given time typically, so I am fat adapted for sure. And I've lost over 100 pounds now. Is that there's no food that is good enough for me to actually go back to that existence. In addition, my PTSD that I would suffer from periodically, and anxiety that would creep up occasionally, is all gone as well. Everything is resolved. Now, I know that, it's not magical, and it is just nutrition. In the end, carnivore saved my life. That chick on the left, the inflamed one from 2014, the fat, inflamed person who was miserable, that wasn't living. And there's no food that would ever, ever cause me to go back to that. And I have found a new lease on life. My only regret is that I did not know this sooner, and I didn't realize what was right in front of my face. being in the middle of the industry, thinking that there's a pill for everything. We as humans have got to stop thinking that we can abuse ourselves as much as we want, and then there's always going to be a pill or some kind of quick fix that's going to take care of everything, because that's not how we work as human beings. You're not supposed to hijack your natural body processes or just alleviate symptoms and just keep ignoring problems. Nutrient-dense food is the solution for a lot of today's medical problems. So if you have had inflammation, pain, conditions that you've had to live with for the longest time, and you have not really found any relief from the drugs or treatments or what the modern medical establishment can offer you, give it a try. It's food. It's clean, whole food. What you got to lose? Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope that it helps you. I hope that it inspires you to maybe try to look into this if you need to. Whether you need to lose a lot of weight, a small amount of weight, get rid of inflammation, or try to reverse a medical condition, you should give it a try. I think you'll be amazed at the results. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.